My name is Nick Bonanno. I am a producer for the United Wrestling Network and the senior official for the United Wrestling Network. And I'd like to welcome you tonight to a live recording of the United Wrestling Podcast. My guests tonight are one of the executive producers for Championship Wrestling from Arizona, Mick Greenwood. Hey, Mick.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to be seen.
And, of course, one of the lead commentators for Championship Wrestling from Arizona, and man who wears many hats in our company, Jeramie McPeek.
What's up, guys?
Good to see you, Jeramie. As the United brand is, putting out more different content, things like that, I wanted to put a little bit more focus on Arizona, since it does a very dedicated, I'd say, fan base. Maybe a little smaller than the Hollywood one, but definitely one that's becoming much more louder. Getting into that, I guess, how did both of you get involved in Championship Wrestling from Arizona?
Jeramie, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I've been a lifelong wrestling fan, and I've got a teenage son who's also a big fan, and so he wanted to go out and see a show. I had a mutual friend of Navajo Warrior, and so wanted to find out what it was like to see him wrestle in person. So I took my son out to see a show, and at the Nile Theater, and I noticed that there were no tweets or Facebook posts or Instagram posts made about the show that particular day, and that was in 3 years ago. It was July of 2017. So I reached out and said, "Hey, do you guys need help with social media? Because that's my full-time job," and kind of that's how I got started as a volunteer.
Excellent. How did you know Navajo Warrior?
We had a mutual friend who introduced us, and we went out to lunch, and I got to know him and just thought he was a great guy. And so heard that he wrestled here in town, and I'd never seen a Championship Wrestling from Arizona show or even knew about it. So wanted to go out and see him in person.
Right on. All right, Mick, you have a bit of a different story getting to United. What's your backstory?
So my backstory is I helped somebody in Boston write a pilot for a show that was themed about pro wrestling. And I had been involved in wrestling when I was younger. It was one of those friend of a friend kind of things. It was attached to a producer out here who was somebody who had a relationship with Dave. And so that producer said, "Hey, why don't you do some research for your role?" And I was in the process of moving to Los Angeles. So she set me up to go down and catch a taping of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, which is where I met Dave. It was a very interesting day because it was a very typical day at the Ocean View Pavilion. I just didn't know what a typical day at the Ocean View Pavilion was at that point in time. And it was a really interesting day because a number of people didn't show up. So Dave just put me right to work. So I was there to observe.
Hey, you.
And pretty much, at one point, Schmo was trying to make me be the backup referee that day, even though I'd never worn stripes.
Wow.
And nobody there even knew my name. But he put me in the back and had me produce the refs, which is a job I've gone on to do a whole bunch of times. And it was the day that the ring broke right before the main event between Rockness and PP Ray. And they had to change up. They changed it to a false count anywhere match. And Dave went out to make the announcement and sit at the announce table. And while he was out there, Adam Pearce and Schmo flipped the finish and moved the belts over to PP Ray without telling Dave. And so Dave had to be like, "And look at this!" like while he was on the air. And so at the end of the day, I went up to him and was like, "Hey, it was a real pleasure. I learned a lot." And he looked at me and went, "I bet you did." So
was that just a rib on Dave?
No. It was really interesting because Schmo and Adam Pearce were going back and forth, and they were both kind of looking at me to kind of like settle the dispute, and I'm just like, "Guys, I don't work here." I agreed with the reasoning behind it, and I said as much. But I remember the look I got from Pearce when I agreed. He looked at me like, "Why the hell am I asking you?" And so I ran into Dave about 8 months later when I had finally finished my move from Boston to LA, and I ran into him passing out championship wrestling from Hollywood newspapers outside of Staples Center at Hell in a Cell. And we got to talking, and shortly thereafter, I came down just to hang out and be around it. I'd had a bunch of TV experience, and I showed up, and Nick Bonanno taught me to build the ring. And after that, I was building the ring for a few weeks. Something broke in the audio booth. I knew how to fix it, and that was my last day building the ring. So,
do you know, going back to the Rockness PP race, but do you know what had broken on the ring, if you recall?
I believe one of the boards had cracked.
Oh my!
Right in the middle, like they went and stopped, and they stomped on it, and like there was a divot, like you sank in, and so it was right before the main, and all 4 guys involved decided that they would go out and do falls count anywhere, and Pete ended up with an epic gash above his eye.
Yeah,
and that it was it's funny, like that was how I met Peter Avalon. Was he basically bled on me. And but it was a really amazing ending because when they won, they went up into the rafters and pulled down the PP Ray poster, and that's how it went off the air. It's not the PP Ray, the Rockness Monsters poster. PP Ray pulled it down, and I just remember like looking at it and going, "This is crazy! I can't wait to come back." And so I did.
I'd say I don't know if you were there for this. It might have been in the time between when you were there the first time and when you came back, but a few months later. Peter beat Kevin Martinson for the TV title, and Peter did the same thing. He went over and ripped Kevin's poster down, and Martinson, to his credit, was like grabbed onto the poster and like just held it, and he showed up at the next TV like clutching this giant poster of himself, hugging the belt, and so he's hugging this giant poster of him, and there's this I keep seeing this photo pop up of just him in such forlorn of the loss of his title while he's so happy in the photo with the title over his shoulder. So maybe that was a recurring theme with them.
I think that was in between my first appearance and sort of my permanent joining, but I remember I started following it online pretty closely. So I do remember what you're talking about. Like I was one of the Patreon subscribers in that interim so I could keep up with the show.
Right on. Cool. So for those who might not, for those who might not know, if they're more current fans of the Arizona product, the show actually began in the Desert Diamonds Casino in Tucson. We ran there for about a year before switching over to the Nile Theater. Mick, were you at the Tucson shows before we even? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I've made it to all but 4 Arizona tapings in its history. I was one of the 4 people on the advanced production team who went out for the first one.
Excellent.
So. It was me, Peter, John King, and actually, I guess it was a 3-person production team because the 4th person was Eli Drake, and he was just there to hang out. So.
Right. There's only so much we could say about Eli Drake, but
don't let him. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
No. It's a great guy. I love him.
Yeah.
Now, Mick, what was the first show that you worked for Arizona actually like producing? I think I know what it is, and it was a great story if I'm right, but do you remember?
Yeah. Right the month before the 1-year anniversary of Championship Wrestling from Arizona, we moved from the Desert Diamond Casino to the Nile Theater where we are now, and right before that 1-year anniversary, the person who had been the executive producer and writer decided to move on. I was having a kid, getting married, great guy. Angelo did a great job, and then it was just time to pass the torch. So it went over to Peter and I. And the first show that we did was the last show that Angelo booked, which was Cavalcade of Champions. And it was a really huge event for United because all of the active territories that were participating in United sent champions, and we just, there was belts from all over the country being defended. And Dave came down with us, and he got really sick, and he was supposed to unveil the United World Heavyweight Championship, which of course we're excitedly building toward to this day. And he was supposed to be the one who was supposed to open the show, but he was so sick about 10 minutes before we went on the air, he throws his blazer at me in like a button-down shirt, so I look like I'm wearing Dad's clothes. And he's like, "You do it. You're in charge now." And so I forgot I was wearing a bandana because it was so hot, and I went out on camera wearing a bandana, which meant for the next year or so, that thing was stuck on my head. And so during the opening segment, the first thing we did was we installed Peter as the head matchmaker, which basically all story flowed from that. So that was kind of my first day on the job. Were you talking about that, Jeramie, or were you talking about having?
That was not the one I was talking about, but I do remember that. That was a fun show for sure. Maybe it was the first show that you booked. The one that when we crowned our first Arizona State champion.
Oh my.
Oh man, I couldn't tell which of the horrible stories from the beginning. I was like, is he talking about the one where Peter and I had to move the ring 4 times in a truck that didn't fit by ourselves? But no, we booked Alberto Del Rio or El Patron or Coke Fiend McGee. But he goes by many names. He's a hell of a guy. Swell fella. But he was supposed to run, we'd moved over to the Empire nightclub. We found this awesome old school belt, and we were going to crown our first champion. We had no belts in Arizona for like the first year and 2 months. And we found a belt. We decided we were going to have a tournament to crown a champion. And as a big banner feature attraction as part of it, we were going to have Alberto Del Rio wrestle against Killer Cross, who is now carrying a cross. And I think he was Alberto El Patron at the time. Anyway, he insisted that we go through this other promoter in town, which we did. That promoter decided to run a free Lucha Libre show across the street and didn't draw any tickets for us. Del Rio decided not to come for flu-like symptoms, and we had 28 people in the room. But the TV crowd, the TV crew shot it really, really well, and we had a really fun meeting backstage beforehand where we just like, look, tonight the eyeballs aren't in the room, but they're going to be on TV, and if we make good TV, we'll get to do more. And we did. We made really, really good TV. And despite the fact that the banner, the main attraction didn't show up, we just went out and we just leveled with the crowd, which is something we've had to do. Like, guys, he's not here. We're going to do our best to entertain you. If you want to refund at the end of the night, I'll be standing at the door with a stack of money ready to give it back. That has happened 3 times to us. I've never given any money back, despite being willing to. So we have always been able to recover. The cast and the crew have always been able to put on a show that was worthy of people's tickets. And it was a hell of a beginning because I couldn't tell which horror story you wanted me to tell.
There are two parts about that story that I think you missed. One, I don't think Alberto had the flu. Didn't he say someone in his family had an emergency or something, and he recorded a really bad video in Mexico and sent it to us that we posted on social media, saying that he'd be showing up at a show soon to make up for it.
Yes, and waiting we are. But no, I didn't say the flu. I said flu-like symptoms. Which
got it.
As you know from your time in sports, means
yes,
they did something dumb.
Right.
So.
And I'm pretty sure the 28 people in the crowd included all the wrestlers and all of us talent.
Yeah,
there was about 5 or 6 on one side of the ring, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was a good warm-up for COVID wrestling.
Oh, gosh, right. A smaller, but I'd say more forgotten moment from that day too is that show actually marked the United debut of Royce Isaacs, who went on to be a huge star for us in the later NWA.
Yes, that's true.
I remember a thing that really stuck out for me with him was he was a lot of people sometimes if they're first coming in, I'll ask him to do a promo just say who are you, and he had one. He just rattled it off, put a $sign on that, all that. So I was very happy that day, at least for knowing that I'd be able to work with Royce again, which we did for quite a while.
Yeah, Royce had a strong start that day. Like we booked him to go pretty deep in the tournament, and he had really strong showings, so much so that we were able to book him strong from there on in. It was like we gave him a chance. He looked, acted, performed the part, and it allowed us to do a lot of stuff with him going forward. I know his travel schedule kept him from getting to Arizona as often as he or we would have liked, but we would have used him every time if we could have got him. So
that was the first time I'd ever seen Cross in person as well, and he was impressive. We ended up. I'm trying to remember. Did we end up putting him in there with EJ at the last minute?
He tore EJ apart for 2 segments. It was I felt, and bless EJ's heart.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of what ended up happening with the show started in those couple of months, because we had gotten a look at EJ a few times, Peter and I, when because he had wrestled for us at the Desert Diamond a bunch of times, and we just liked him. We were just like, there's just nothing not to like about this kid. He's a better wrestler every time we see him. He's more in shape every time we see him. And every time we see him, he's even happier than the last time we saw him. There's just nothing not to love about EJ Sparks. And so we wanted to push him. We initially were going to put him in the tournament, and we had to make a switch. And we had a long-term push involved in mind for him from the beginning. But when Del Rio didn't show up, we were like, okay, here's a real opportunity for you, dude. Like, last second, gonna go wrestle a guy he works hard. He's a big dude, and he likes to show it. And like you said, Nick, he did. He got thrown around that ring 2 segments, and he came back and said thank you to everybody. And he was made in the shade after that. It just took him a few months to figure it out. So.
So Jeramie, you mentioned before you came in that because you noticed that the social media could use a little bit more attention. And then at some point, I remember just sticking a microphone in your hand, and then you were a backstage announcer, like out of nowhere, when you were just trying to take some photos to put on that social media. Do you remember what that situation was? My memory's a little foggy. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, Mick may know better than I do, but I think they just had a lack of people at the time. They were running low. A couple people couldn't make it, and I think David Marquez even maybe suggested, why don't you give McPeek a shot? And so it's, having grown up watching wrestling and always pretended to call matches when I was a kid using my Star Wars and G.I. Joe figures. I was excited to give it a shot, and I was pretty nervous the first few times, but really fell in love with it quickly. And then eventually Mick gave me the shot to do play-by-play, which I was terrified of. I even remember messaging you the night before and saying, I don't know about this. I think you're making a mistake doing this, because I just had no clue. Even though I'd watched wrestling forever and knew wrestling inside and out, just the idea of like knowing when to throw to commercial and when to pause to let my partner talk and when to talk about, to wrap up a show, whatever it was, all that stuff just terrified me, because it's not really things I'd ever thought of before.
It's and you are correct. It was the call to give the stick to you the first time came from Dave. And as does every call of any talking head we put on the air. Like, for sure. He very much. That's a huge part of the United presentation style, and that style guide is written and contained entirely between the ears of one Dave Marquez. And so it is, but he has a real knack for it. Like, he points at somebody and goes, "That guy can do that," and lo and behold, they can. And so as soon as I don't think you did a bad promo. I think you were money from the first take backstage. And that's why when we needed a new play-by-play, it was a very, very, very easy thing to go, no, Jeramie can do this. Right personality, right engagement with the camera, something unique and something classic at the same point in time. And that's not something you can really coach. You either are that person or you're not. And everything else that you can coach, you study harder than we coach. So that is a decision I have never regretted for even a second, and I'm very, very relieved to have been lucky enough to be in the opportunity to make it. So,
well, thank you. That means a lot to me. As you know, you're a good friend, and I always hear people tell horror stories about. Maybe not horror stories, but always tell stories about Vince McMahon yelling at people in their ear when they're on broadcast. And it's just the opposite with Mick. He's always feeding us good lines and coaching us and telling us, hey, that was a great line, or get prepared for this. And so I don't think I could do it if you weren't in my ear, kind of helping me along the way.
You should have heard Billy Trask talking to the camera operators and by extent the announcers as well, the commentators. He is maybe not anything too aggressive, but certainly a very colorful mouth on that young man.
Good to know.
She
I'll be
does.
prepared.
She does. You get a really good play-by-play from the back from Billy about how his digestive issues are handling that day. So
So Jeramie, okay, so you're given the opportunity to be a backstage announcer, a backstage interviewer. What are some of who are some of the people that you felt that you work well with when conducting an interview with them, or some maybe people who left a lasting impression on you?
Oh, good question. I think Alex Salyers and I always had a really good chemistry together. He was a lot of fun. In fact, I remember Mick telling me at one point that you're a coach and he's the rock. Just kind of go with that. And so Alex would kind of always grab my tie and grab me by the throat and give me a hard time, kind of bully me a little bit. But we had a lot of fun together. EJ Sparks was always great to work with. Ray Rosas. I really enjoyed interviewing Willie Mack backstage when he was there for, I think it was the 2019 Grand Canyon Clash. But my favorite one was the Keepers of the Faith. And I'd never met them. I literally met them as they were walking onto in camera with me. And about 10 seconds into the interview, Gallo grabbed his chain and wrapped it around my neck and started slowly squeezing as I was trying to talk. We hadn't planned that out in advance. I had no idea it was coming. And he pretty much left the chain around my neck for the rest of the promo. And so as I was trying to wrap it up, I was trying to get the words out. But that was actually fun. It was a nice little ad lib on his part.
Yeah, very good.
That was a great promo. Turn Jeramie into Jacob Marley like that.
Anything. So you mentioned crowning the first champion back at that show in Phoenix. So we've had several notable champions in Arizona. So first being Gino Rivera, coined the
Yes.
"I told you so" in that match, I believe, or maybe the promo right before it, and really drove that home. I'd say after the match. So how was it working with Gino Rivera for such a long time? Really having him as the face of that company for that title.
I loved working with Gino, and I take nothing away from him to correct you and say I coded the "I told you so," and it was the basis of the character. It was that when he won, I think if you looked at the 8 people who were in that field, he was maybe 7th, maybe 8th going into it in terms of the person that people thought would win. But I love working with Gino because he is so good at making people hate him. That extra little smug, smarmy, punkish, doesn't care, is going to tell you how great he is and then kick you in the nuts and run away. It's so much fun to work with a heel like that, particularly if you have a great baby face. And I think that for me, that first run between Gino and EJ, some of my favorite wrestling that we ever did because it was real. It was just real wrestling. Our first Grand Canyon Clash, which will live in infamy for many, many reasons, including the gavel on a pole match, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That's one of my favorite finishes because we did the false finish where Gino pretended EJ had hit him with the belt and EJ got disqualified. And I think that was the first time we had ever provoked such a real reaction out of the fans at the aisle.
Man, they were mad.
They were. And we ended up going, because of Gino, we would go on to piss them off quite a bit. And so I thought his promos were great. I thought his facial expressions were great. I loved what he would do between matches. His Instagram work was really good.
Yeah.
He would write songs about how much he enjoyed beating up EJ, and then he was in them. I loved it. We were working a program with him coming off the title loss that was going to see him go on strike. He's still there, and so as far as I'm concerned, that program's still running, and we'll see what happens in the future.
Gino was fantastic. I at that point, I remember I was also doing social media and the backstage interviews, but also photography. And I remember taking a few photos of him where he'd jump into the crowd and stand on seats and just open his arms. And the crowd was just like screamed, like I literally thought they were going to tear him apart. Seeing how hot the Nile Theater was for him and how angry they were at him. And then how about Mick, you didn't mention EJ Sparks' mom, who actually grabbed a chair and was going to head towards the ring at one point because she was so upset about what had happened to her son. And his sister had to calm her down and say, "No, Mom, you can't get in the ring with a chair."
The rush of Mama Sparks.
Yes.
The chair swinging brigade coming was one of my favorite moments. But that was actually not Gino's fault. That occurred. That EJ finally beat Gino for the championship. Finally did, won it clean. It was done. It was AZ 100, which to that point was our biggest show, and to this day, I think still one of our best. We crushed that event. But the best part of it was that at the end of it, we had the Silver Spotlight, which is basically the PP3. We have the Silver Spotlight, and we had awarded it. It was the first one. People forgot it existed. We had given it to the Agents of Chaos, and they had been doing promos about how it was dumb and they weren't going to use it. And it was, they took it so that people couldn't have it, and they were hating on it. And then EJ wins. And Nick, are you the referee? I think you were.
I was, yeah. So I got the title from the timekeeper, but I actually never got to hand it to EJ. So between the bell for the match ringing to end, and I guess the moments when I would have walked over to him, the Agents of Chaos had already come out. Walking almost like about to present it to EJ, and then okay, I guess the match is happening. We're doing this. Hold up the title, hold up the cup, and what happened next?
And out come the Agents of Chaos. They came right past the camera, which created that really cool shot. They came right past the hard cam into the ring. EJ, to his credit, when that match started, I think everybody thought he had nothing left in the tank. He found some extra, even almost pinned Evan Daniels, but in the end just couldn't overcome and couldn't beat a fresh Evan Daniels, particularly with R3 at ringside. And EJ became the shortest lived champion in Arizona history, a title reign that was measured in seconds. But he made up for it.
Yeah. Let's see.
What are you missing most right now, Mick? Obviously, it's been, almost 4 months. Feels like 4 years since our last show. I think we had to we pulled the plug on the Grand Canyon Clash 3 days before, right after the NBA canceled their season and the NHL did, and we just realized we can't go through with this right now. And
that hurt.
Still does.
That hurt, because that was probably the best booked show we'd had. There were so many pieces of that we were really just looking forward to, including a huge surprise, which won't be repeated, but I don't know if it's my story to tell. But there was something huge that was going to happen there. C'est la vie. What I think I miss most of all is I love the hours leading up to a show. I love when we're waking up and pulling whatever's left of ourselves from the night before together, hopping in the van, going to the theater, having a nice cup of coffee, production meeting, promos, setting up the ring. And I love it because everybody, you never get a better sense. Casey Beals, who is he's our hard cam operator, gets a lot of great behind the scenes photos. And those are the ones I've actually found myself going to look at on the moments where I miss it, because you just get a sense of what a community it is and what a collective it is and how strong everybody is in their roles and how they don't need to be told what to do. They know what to do. Everybody operates, works together. Everybody's got a good personality. Everybody gets along. And it's fun to be in there and feel that energy, so much so that when the crowd shows up, you just kind of feel like you've spent hours and hours making a meal and you just put it on the table and the crowd shows up and eats it. And usually they are pretty happy for it. So that I miss those moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
See,
How about you?
Yeah, for me, it's missing all the people. You know, I've been a fan of wrestling my whole life, but once I kind of became a regular part of our show, I guess I got to know everybody, and it's just amazing how what chemistry there is between everybody and what a family it's really like. It's really different than anything else I've been a part of. All of the different professional sporting events I've worked over the years, you know, the athletes who you see every day, they just kind of say hey and keep on going. But when you go to the Nile Theater and see all the other guys, they're excited to see you. They genuinely look forward to giving you a hug and asking you how you're doing and how's your family and what's going on with work and what's new with your life. And like, the camaraderie really surprised me. I didn't expect that. And so I really miss that. And then of course I miss just calling the action and seeing the matches and the fans and all of it.
I'm with you. I actually have a question for you both, if I can ask. I have my opinion, but I'm interested since you both worked the show. I think that we have a very, very strong. Both Jeramie and I have commented on the camaraderie. I have a theory that comes from feeling like we were the B show, so we had everything to prove, and that it got a lot of people. I think there's something about being on the B show where you go, okay, we all have to be good if we want to go on to the next thing. Like you really can't kind of go into business for yourself, nor should you ever. It's not really the way to do it, but I think it kind of helped people who are on the show appreciate the opportunity and realize that the show getting good allowed them to get better. But I'd love to know what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I absolutely agree with that. I think a thing that Arizona has as well is the fact that there are fewer resources than there are for Hollywood. And so that enables people to be multifaceted because they have to be. Sometimes at Hollywood, we have more producers than we have jobs. And so things get, divvied up in a pretty widespread thing. But at Arizona, say for Peter, for example, producer Peter Avalon is not just a ring name. Like, he's producing all the matches. He's producing wrestling commentary or in their earpieces. He's standing there at promos with us. He's doing all the stuff besides all the things that he did to get us to the show to begin with, just like you, Mick. Like, and if Pete wasn't ready for that role by having, been given that opportunity, and then having to live up to it, then I don't think he would be where he is today. But I would say in that same token, I feel like I fit into that same boat. I came in as a ref pretty much only who did ring crew sometimes. And based on the need for there being more, I was able to take as much as I wanted, essentially. And so I definitely agree that helps, bring that together. And from the wrestler standpoint, I absolutely agree with you, to the point where when guys do end up going out to Hollywood or to other shows, it is, I hope that they do feel like, that absolutely everything in the Arizona show is what got them there. But what is it called? Yeah.
And I want to give a quick shout out to Sweet Robin Shaw and Scott Johnson, referee Scott Johnson, who both chimed in there on the Facebook chat. Glad that you guys are joining us here on Facebook Live. Thank you for watching. Miss both you guys. In terms of your question, Mick, I was never really involved in Hollywood previously. Now, of course, I'm helping with the Hollywood Social and United Wrestling Social, so I am more today. But so I never really felt the B show idea, the concept of that, I guess, like you guys probably did. But for me, it was more of all of us wanting to prove ourselves, because there isn't really a regular wrestling promotion in Arizona, but there's a lot of wrestling fans here. WWE brought Royal Rumble here and brought WrestleMania here. So a lot of wrestling fans here. So it's kind of wanting to prove ourselves and let people know we're there and that we are worth coming out to see, because we've got a great product and it's a lot of fun. So that's what I always felt, and myself personally, that wanted to show everybody what we're all about, what Championship Wrestling of Arizona is.
That's awesome.
Sometimes when you're kind of given that label, I guess unofficially, of being that B show, sometimes you really have to make a little bit more noise. And definitely having a great show will do that, but also having insane, ridiculous wrestling things happen will do that. A thing I'm often asked is what I think is missing from wrestling, and I really want wrestling to be wild the way it used to be wild.
Yes.
And that can mean a lot of things, but I feel like you guys understand what I mean. And I think Arizona has been able to capture some of that wild nature in a way that almost you can't get away with at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
You mentioned before you kind of went through this quickly, Mick, but we had a gavel on a pole match, which resulted in the producer of our show losing control of the TV show. To, of all people, Ryan Morales, the biggest crybaby we've had in Arizona history.
It's true.
And it completely changed the whole, the whole scheme of the show for a month or two. And I think that's something that we're very proud of, but it's also something that I don't think anyone really expected. So if that's what it's going to, if that's just a small example, I think, of all the things that we've done in the last couple of years in Arizona, as something that we're able to accomplish by making a little bit of different kind of noise. So if you call it the B show if you want, but I like I said, you can get away with stuff in Arizona that Hollywood doesn't have a chance to. So.
Oh, I don't think of it at the B show. When we were given it as a B show. Right. And I think that and those are my favorite kind of opportunities though, and that's the kind of opportunities that we distribute down there, which is, here you go, make something out of it. Like we're not going to tell you what to do. We're going to give you an opportunity, make something out of it. So, but I love that example that you're using, because when Peter lost the show to Ryan Morales, that was a really good example of the entire cast participating in an angle. Like from the referees to the commentators to the other to the every women's wrestler and valet and manager had to dress up like a Puritan. Every referee and commentator had to wear turtlenecks,
which I liked. Hey. I liked that a lot. But as I know, because it helped. Help keep my earpiece in and all kinds of stuff. I know it could be very warm, but I think Scott Johnson has another comment here. Yeah, he did not. Scott, it was important for the aesthetic. Where's your artsiness?
I like how Scott changed his photo right before this so that he can show off that he's been pumping in solitary. You're looking good, brother. You're looking real good. And I saw a masked Joe Galley, who, of course, we all know died in 2018.
Poor Joe.
So, rest in peace.
His ghost is tweeting to us right now.
It's
we love Joe Galley. So what are some of the other crazy matches you guys have thought about? I remember there was, I don't remember the details, but there was some talk about getting Ryan Morales' cats involved. I don't know if it was a cat collar match or a cat on a pole. I don't remember what it was. There was something to do with cats.
We ended up going with something similar. We had him wrestle against the felines. And
that's right. Oh my gosh.
He just kept trying to play with them instead of pin them.
One of my favorite Ryan Morales things from when he was in control of the show, which, by the way, he changed the name of the show from Championship Wrestling from Arizona to the Championship Wrestling Hour. Ryan J. Morales, Championship Wrestling Hour for Good Boys.
For Good
Boys. That's what it was.
Yeah, that was it. And a thing that he did that probably was my favorite part of his, besides all the turtlenecks and all the actual physical aesthetics of the show, is he kept unsuccessfully trying to go for the Arizona State title. He just couldn't beat Gino, and he booked himself a couple of weeks in a row in the match, and he just couldn't beat him. Partly out of just like his own ineptitude. I think one match he just kept getting counted out, or he kept getting he just could not keep the rules in check enough to even just have a competent match. So rules wise, so that's one of my favorite things from the Ryan Morales run of the Arizona program.
It was it really was kind of transformative, because I think coming out of that, it kind of cemented the other half, because that kind of hit its peak at Grand Canyon Clash 1, which was March 17, I think 2018, and the gavel on a pole was also there. And so I think coming out of that, it really kind of defined the show from there on in. It was that we will do the kind of wild thing, and we will go all in on the wild thing. But at the same time, there's also some really strong, good old-fashioned wrestling feuds. And we kind of came out of that Grand Canyon Clash with both. Like, we had a number of different storylines set up. And when we took over the show, there wasn't really any storylines to inherit. and it spoke to the challenges of booking the territory. Let's just say nothing, any of the people who came before us. But by the time we hit that Grand Canyon Clash, we were kind of all story all the way. And I think that that's one of the things we're very proud of, is that if you work for us for long enough, you get a story. And usually it's not very long. And it's one of the things, and sorry to steal the mic for a second here, but I just want to say, because I know a lot of our guys are watching, and I want them to know I say this behind their back and to their face, which is the amount of effort that goes into determining a storyline is the same. If you are working on a story, you are working on a story. Whether it has a belt, whether you're winning in it or losing in it, if you're in a story, somebody cares enough about you to work on a story. And I feel like that is something that that doesn't get understood enough. If people understood the degree to which Peter and I fret over the bottom of the card, I think they would be very surprised.
So sorry, the dog is barking.
That's sport.
But be sport. I'd like to bring up I think a very important moment in Arizona history for the sake of collaborating with other companies, and that was when we had Nick Aldis defend the NWA World's Championship against Peter Avalon. What did it take to get that match to happen, Mick?
So when Aldis first won, he was on the Aldis Crusade. And I thought that was a great idea that the NWA had, just kind of showcase the legacy and how the NWA has always existed. And it was basically, he said, if you've ever pinned a former champion, you get a shot at me. And on a delightful technicality, well, not technicality, apparently Peter pinned Colt Cabana in the first episode ever of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. The circumstances of that are inconsequential. It went on the books. It counted. And so we started, this was the rise of producer Peter Avalon. So he had a platform, and he decided to use it, as a bad producer would, to go into business for himself. And so we worked on the NWA for a while. We got the match booked. Travel technicality scrubbed the match, and we found out 2 days before. The NWA was incredibly gracious. They could have easily just said, "Yep, them's the breaks, guys," but no, they made a tremendous effort to make things right. And their leadership team, including Billy himself, came to the event and brought Tim Storm. And the crowd initially was like, "That was the former champion. We don't care." But we decided to put him and Peter together, and that was not supposed to be anything other than a "oops, we're sorry," but it was gold.
Yeah,
it was so good that it ended up doing more to help us than I think the championship would have at that point in time. Because it really, once again, showcased the strength of our venue, the strength of our crowd, the quality of our production, and just the overall value of our program. Because the NWA didn't have a TV show at that point in time. They were borrowing from us. And so once Tim Storm showed up for the next 2-3 weeks, the NWA's YouTube channel all had the Championship Wrestling from Arizona little bug in the corner. And that was pretty cool to see. Of course. That led to Tim. Tim is so popular in Arizona. He might be the most popular wrestler in Arizona. Tim.
I would say they call Nick Aldis the national treasure, but Tim Storm is absolutely a national treasure of his own.
Absolutely. I mean, Nick Aldis is a national treasure, just not of this nation. If I had to pick one for this nation, I would pick Tim Storm. But yeah, it ended up where we were able to do some business with the NWA when they had, champions. We've had the national champion. We've had we had the TV champion booked, but we didn't get to do that. And ultimately, it allowed us, the story between Peter and Tim went all the way to Nashville at NWA 70. It made it onto a huge legendary card right there as a grudge match, Peter Avalon and Tim Storm. It was so cool. And ultimately, we were able to continue lobbying coming out of that.
I think we lost Mick for a moment.
Oh, there he is.
He's back.
All right, sorry. Apparently, when my phone rings, I lose control here. But we just started lobbying like crazy. We just started having Peter cut promos, even not knowing if Nick was ever going to show up. And we just did some real nasty stuff on the internet and created a buzz. And the NWA was kind enough to finally send him, and it was great.
And if I remember correct, Mick, that episode with that match had higher ratings that week here in Arizona on TV than both Raw and AEW and SmackDown.
Really?
SmackDown had just debuted on Fox, and we beat all three of those in the TV ratings here in Arizona that week.
Yes, we were the top-rated wrestling program in Arizona for 1 week, and that you might say that's, well, what is that? I'll tell you what that is. That's everything. That counts.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Man.
That was early in the Wednesday Night Wars too, and we got a win on late Sunday night.
Yep. It's us and the My Pillow, but you know, we get it.
What's it called? So a question that's been coming up a lot lately in regards to Arizona is when are we going to get Arizona tag team champions? Is that something that's been on your mind?
Oh man, very much so. I don't want to show too many cards, but suffice to say, we did share with the public that it was a goal for 2020, this is our fourth season. So we had a season 4 goal of improving the tag team division, and I think we're making good on that goal. You've seen the rise of the Highwaymen. We've taken 2 wildly popular singles wrestlers, put them together into an equally as popular and really good tag team in Alex Salyers and Richie Slade. We've brought the Keepers of the Faith in. You've seen tag teams like Tough and Cool and Sweet and Sour, Manny Lemons and our boys.
The pair of Legals.
Shaw. Yep. The pair of, I was just going to say, and then of course, like, you know, you have to build it all around the centerpiece in the middle, which is the Tribe. You know, we started calling them the greatest tag team in Arizona history. And I haven't found anyone who's raised their hand and said, I don't agree. As soon as we started calling them that, like everybody was like, yeah, they are. Cause they are. Like,
Agents of Chaos may not agree with that, but everybody else would.
I was just watching a Hollywood throwback match that we aired last week for Heritage Hall. It's a four-way tag for the Hollywood Heritage tag titles, and the Tribe are in that. And Navajo Warrior and Hawaiian Lion look so much stronger and more, frightening today than they did 10 years ago.
I thought the same thing.
I'm saying if anyone's been following, Navajo's Instagram or even Hawaiians, that the show might be on a hiatus for the time being, but those guys are going to come back stronger than ever. I really. My heart goes out to whoever steps across the ring from them on that first outing. Gosh,
beasts. They've been lifting cars.
Attacked by the go ahead.
No, they've been lifting cars and tires and trees and all kinds of stuff. They've been machines working on their bodies right now.
Yeah. It's been impressive to see, and they are frightening. I ran out one time to help them after they had been laid out by the Keepers of the Faith. It's one of my jobs. I got to run out, help the guys to the back if they've been a little bit too banged up. And Nav was not really with it, and so when I came out and gave him a nudge, he thought the fight was still going, and he took a swing at me. And I got to tell you, I was like. I was like the woman from Tom and Jerry when she sees the mouth and like, I think I jumped back like 7 feet, like I'd been set on fire. I was like, I'm gonna die. That blind, angry Navajo warrior is coming for me. I'm going to die.
And we have set someone on fire, kind of, in Arizona. Oliver Grimsley threw a fireball at Ray Rosas, which is how he won the TV title. So. Be careful what you say, because it will or has already been an Arizona storyline.
I forgot about that.
That's true. It was that was the first. Yeah, that was the first United level United level championship to change hands on Arizona soil. Was the TV title.
Right on.
We talked about crazy matches, but we didn't talk about the Tomb of Terror.
And I believe Grimsley.
Is Grimsley here?
Oh man. I'm always worried.
he was tweeting me from beyond the grave or from the inside of the tomb, I guess.
Yeah, I think he said he was
last week.
still in the tomb, I think.
Well, I said it to him there, and I'll say it to you guys again. He should just be thankful that I installed a Wi-Fi receiver in that thing so I could listen to podcasts while I painted it. So as long as he's getting Wi-Fi, he can stay on Twitter, I guess. I don't know.
That's true. That's true. People. It's deceivingly large. You know, you think it's only about this big, but you look in there, and I got to tell you, it just kind of goes on forever. Once you go in, God knows where you end up. So, and unfortunately, poor Oliver found that out the hard way.
Trying to remember, there was an episode of The Simpsons where there was a bunch of Major League Baseball players joined the power plant's softball team. And someone steps into essentially a bottomless pit. Was it Mike Scioscia? I don't remember. But somebody, Mick, you would know this if you can hear me. He's just kind of falling forever as the episode continues. So I kind of picture that might be what Oliver Grimsley is experiencing.
We lost Mick, but I don't remember that episode, although I did watch The Simpsons for many years. But
it is a classic.
Yeah.
Let's go to the chat for a moment.
Ozzie Smith.
Thank you. Sorry.
There you go. There's another familiar face, Justice. Good to see you. She wants to know about the girls coming up, and I saw someone else ask about the women's wrestling as well. Is Mick back?
Let's see. I think we got him right here.
I see his thumbnail. There he is.
There we go. Thanks, guys.
Hey,
it just died on me.
Hey, so Justice asks, or she says, I think the guys need to worry about the girls coming up. Talk a little bit about the women's division that we're developing in Arizona.
That was another big goal. We started working on that one last year. That was for the first 2 seasons. That was probably the question we got the most, which is, where's the women's division? When are we gonna see a women's division in Arizona? It was always a goal, and because it was a goal, we didn't want to do it poorly. So we spent a lot of time looking at who could participate in such a thing. We've really started to grow it. Obviously, Morgan has been our ace. She was undefeated until the very last day of season 3, and she has had a rocky start to season 4. But we've been able to bring some real talent to town. We've had Heather Monroe down there. We've had Ruby Reyes down there, and we've also seen some real strong young talent step in. Bryn Thorne comes to mind, and of course Sandra Moon. Yep.
Of course. Yeah.
And so, and I feel terribly because I'm leaving some folks out, but it has been Leslie Iris, Anna May. Yep. It's been a work in progress, but it has been a work with focus. It is something that's very, very important to us. We don't consider it. We take it very seriously, so it's very important to be good. Because if it's not good, it's just the simple fact of the world is that women's wrestlers are going to be criticized in a way that men's wrestlers are not. And it's not fair, it's not right, but it's reality. And because of that, we want to make sure that we are doing our best to put them in a position where the quality of their output is seen for what it is, and not to have to put them in a situation where we didn't set them up for the success that they are able to achieve.
One of the marquee matches for the Grand Canyon Clash was going to be Ruby Reyes versus Morgan in a I guess the third of their series. So that's one that I'm disappointed we didn't get to see. Mick, do you have a feel for whenever we return? I know we don't know when that is, but when we return, do you think we'll try to stick with the same kind of card that we had for the Clash lined up?
As of right now,
you talked about that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Jeramie. I looked at the card actually preparing for this, and I hadn't looked at it in a while. Most of it still works. So it's really just it'll depend on, we were using a lot of, as always, most of our biggest matches were between the members of our cast, which is what we really try to do. We try to make sure that the people at the top of the card are the people who you're going to see the following week. Obviously, there are always exceptions to that, but we're really just kind of at this point looking at a couple of travel schedules from some fly-ins to see if we can still do it. And maybe sharing too much of how the soup is made, but hopefully we can get a cage. So, I think if we can do those things, I would imagine that the Grand Canyon Clash will go on in its original form in the future.
So as we're kind of starting to wind down here, I'm curious if the both of you have an idea of what you want the legacy of championship wrestling from Arizona to look like. What do you want that legacy to be?
You want me to go first, Mick?
Yeah, I'd like to think about that. So I'm selfishly going to take So,
I think, well, hopefully we're around for a long time. So hopefully nobody's talking about our legacy, for another 10 or 20 years. But, I think hopefully that local wrestling fans had a blast, always enjoyed coming to our shows. Really felt like it was worthwhile time and money, and they're glad that they were a part of our audience over the years, our AZ crazies, and that they got to see a lot of talented wrestlers who went on to bigger and better things. We've had guys like Cross and Carl Fredericks and Jungle Boy and Scorpio Sky. And we've had a lot of guys come through Arizona that have wrestled for us who've gone on already. And of course, Peter Avalon, we can't forget to talk about the librarian, but so that they got to see some amazing talent and wrestlers here early on, and can always say, oh, I remember seeing that person in Arizona. Those shows were great. That's really what I think I would like our legacy to be.
That's tough to follow. I'm now regretting letting you go first, but I think I will just add on to that by saying this. I think that ultimately, what I will look to for the success of the show in the long run is we have done a really, really great job of drawing children into the audience. And that's for me the funnest part. Is like when a lot of the photos Jeramie takes, like I love watching kids dying to catch a lemon. It's just a lemon, but because Manny Lemons is throwing it, they want it. I love the kids who stand on their chairs and point and yell and say, "You're mean, I don't like," the kids that bring signs, the kids who are there with their moms and their dads and their grandmothers and their grandfathers who are passing on the love of wrestling. And I have had a number of different parents reach out to me a lot to thank us and thank the show, or they've posted it on social media and Jeramie's retweeted it or regrammed it, saying, took them to the first show today, they loved it, it was such a great time. To me, I'm really hopeful that someday, I'm old and tired and still watching wrestling, and, whoever ends up being on top at that point in time, let's say it's AEW, but like the AEW world champion says, when I saw my first match, when I knew I wanted to do this forever, there was a gavel hanging on a pole. So,
my gosh.
Yeah. Something silly like that.
Awesome.
That's a good answer.
I'd say, speaking of families and moments like that, a couple weeks ago, we were talking with family man Ray Rosas, who is the current Arizona state champion, holds that belt very proudly. And I was kind of asking him about what he thinks are some of the markers for United, whether it's Hollywood or Arizona. And the thing he was very quick to bring up was the fact that for Arizona, both you and Peter know the cast so well that it enables you to create these stories that work on a better level beyond even the sum of their parts. That's something that Hollywood, which has a more spread out cast, either Northern California, Las Vegas, Arizona, other states, that we don't get afforded as much because we're not always getting to collaborate with the same people. And so I think a great advantage that you guys have is that you get to know not only the wrestlers as wrestlers, but you get to know them as people as well. And developing that relationship over a couple of years really enables these stories to transcend the TV screen and really make those meanings. So when you talk about, we want someone in the future to point to the TV and say, I saw this ridiculous thing in Mesa, and that's what made me say, I want to do that. I think it starts right from the core of where you guys are thinking. So for me, I hope for Arizona's legacy is being able to collaborate like that. And create the best stories because of the relationships that you guys have forged.
Thank you, man. And that's really nice to hear. And that's a hell of a compliment coming from Ray, who is probably pro wrestling's most valuable unsigned talent. Hint, hint. Hint, someone
Yes.
sign Ray Rosas. Like, so that's my response to Ray.
All right, guys. Mick, where can we find you online?
Pretty much just on Instagram these days because I run my mouth too much and piss people off. And so, what is my handle on Instagram? I don't even know.
Is it Mick Greenwood?
Nope, I am at Mick Greenwood. There you go.
As about you, Jeramie? Or...
Oh, wait, go ahead.
I should probably also point out my band, The Bottom Dollars, released a record.
Hey.
We recorded it in Hollywood and mastered it through Capitol Records. It's on Spotify. It's called Marvelous, and according to the review that we just got, it is. So
excellent. We'll make sure to check that out.
thank you.
As about you, Jeramie? Where can we find you?
I can verify that the record's fantastic. I listen to it all the time when taking the dog for a walk, so I love it. And go check out The Bottom Dollars on Spotify for sure. I am just at Jeramie, Jeramie. You can see it right there. See it right there. On Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I've got it on all three, so follow me on any of those. Also want to give a shout out to Steve Carroll, who says he just started watching our show, and to Britt, one of our biggest fans, who's at every show with her dad, and of course Captain Caveman of the Steel Cage, who chimed in earlier. They are big sponsors and supporters of the show, so thank you guys for your support and for all of you for watching and joining the chat today.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I am at Nicholas Bonanno, and make sure to follow United on all the social media. So on Twitter, that's at United Wrestling. On Instagram, it's at United Wrestling Network, and same on Facebook and YouTube. So again, thanks everyone for joining us. Watch Championship Wrestling from Arizona. If you have not seen it yet, it's a real treat. Check it out on Fight. And I think we're on YouTube.
Yes, Nick froze, but we are on
YouTube. So again, thanks everyone for joining us, and shout out to everyone who networks with United.
Thank you.
Take it easy.